Hi, I'm Andy Miocha and you're watching AnewZ. Here are the headlines. Investigation team will examine what kind of a rocket caused the plane crash in Aktau, according to Azerbaijani minister. We bring you plane crash survival stories. Stewardess and passenger speak on the last minutes of the tragic Baku-Grozny flight. Vladimir Putin says Russia might use Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missile again. Thank you for tuning in. The team investigating the Azal plane crash in Aktau that left 38 people dead will examine what kind of a rocket struck the plane, according to the Azerbaijani transport minister. Aviation experts were invited to join the inquiry.
The team investigating the Azal plane crash, along with aviation specialists invited for this case, will examine what kind of weapon, or rather what kind of rocket, caused the plane crash in Aktau, according to Azerbaijan's Minister of Digital Development and Transport, Reshad Nabiev. He noted that Azerbaijani and Kazakh officials have spoken to the survivors and witnesses to gain a clearer understanding of the cause.
During our visit to survivors, including those with Russian citizenship, all of them, without exception, stated that they heard 3 blast sounds when the aircraft was above Grozny city. They indicated that these sounds came from outside, suggesting there was an external impact on the plane. As a result of the blast, one of the flight attendants sustained injuries to her hand, while another woman suffered injuries to both her hand and leg. In other footage, holes are visible on the plane's wing, along with various signs of damage inside the plane, particularly in its interior parts, caused by what appears to be an impact from sharp external objects. Our investigation team, along with aviation specialists invited for this case, will now examine what kind of weapon, or rather, what kind of rocket, was used.
Touching upon other versions of what could have led to the crash of the plane, Mr. Nabiev said that some needed further investigation. However, most of them are easily refuted by the evidence at hand. For example, experts already concluded that there was external interference.
Bildiğiniz kimi kütləvi informasiya vasitələrində ilk saatlarda müxtəlif informasiyalar.
As you know, in the initial hours following the incident, various pieces of information were leaked in the media. Among the leaked claims was the suggestion that the plane may have been struck by birds. However, the initial conclusion reached by experts is that the debris found on the ground and the witness statements indicate that there was external interference.
Burada kənar müdaxilə olub, amma indi söhbət gedir ki,
the current question is what type of weapon caused this external interference. If you paid close attention to the information provided by Kazakh officials, they referred to a claim made by the air traffic controller in Rostov that the explosion might have been caused by an oxygen cylinder.
Rostovda olan dispatcher tərəfindən verildiyinə.
We believe this claim needs to be thoroughly investigated first, to confirm whether this information was indeed given or not. We also believe that the information originating from Rostov might have been shared by an interested party. Furthermore, as I already mentioned, the evidence contradicting this claim includes the fact that there were 3 separate explosions and that these explosion sounds were clearly external.
Azerbaijan Airlines plane flying from Baku to Grozny tragically crashed near Aktau, Kazakhstan on December 25th. The crash led to the death of 38 people, including both pilots, and left 29 passengers injured. While the cause was initially unclear, preliminary investigations now strongly suggest the involvement of a surface-to-air missile.
The courage and heroism of the Baku-Grozny flight crew saved the lives of more than 20 people. 2 of the survivors, a stewardess and a passenger, took us through the last minutes of the tragic flight.
There were 2 explosions outside the plane and shrapnel fell into the plane's cabin. These are the words of Aydan Rahimli. She is a stewardess of Azerbaijan Airlines, one of the survivors of BakuGry flight.
The plane was in good condition. There was no malfunction. It attempted to land at Grozny airport once, but it didn't succeed. It tried a second time, but again, it was unsuccessful. On the third attempt, the plane was struck from the left side. At that moment, oxygen masks dropped down.
After the explosion, chaos engulfed the plane cabin and the passengers panicked. Stewardess Aydan tried her best to calm them, but soon her fellow flight attendant got wounded.
We were trying to calm the passengers and telling them not to unfasten their seatbelts. Then we heard the sound of an explosion and a second strike occurred. After the second strike, our flight attendant, Mr. Zulfigar, was injured in the arm. I provided first aid and gave him water. Those moments were very stressful because he could have lost a lot of blood, and it was necessary to stop the bleeding.
And that is when emergency landing was announced by pilots, and lead flight attendant Hakuma started to give instructions to cabin crew and passengers.
Lead stewardess asked, "Do you know what to do as a first aid?" And I said yes. She said, "Okay, then we are making an emergency landing, but it should have been a normal emergency landing." We did not know what's going to happen. Ms. Hakuma explained to the passengers all the necessary information about the situation. She said, "Everything is going to be fine."
Aydan says she was at the very back of the plane, at the place of service of flight attendants. In the last minutes, she only saw the passengers who were in the brace position, according to emergency landing rules.
The plane continued to fly, searching for a place to land. It wasn't working. It kept ascending and descending. The most tragic moments were at the very end. At that moment, the plane started rapidly descending. We were all seated, removed the mask, and tightened our seatbelts. I lowered my head and sat in the brace position. The plane was still descending. Then I was thrown to the right, then to the left. The seatbelt held me in place. When I opened my eyes, the plane was upside down.
Seatbelts fastened stewardess to her seat and she stayed there until very end. Aydan Rahimli says they did not know where they landed. When she got out of plane, people were already there to help, and it was then Aydan heard that they are in Aktau, Kazakhstan. Stewardess of Azal says it is a miracle that half of the people survived the crash. One of these survivors already recorded his last-minute prayers. Passenger Supankul Rahimov said he had begun to recite prayers and prepare for the end after hearing the bang.
I wasn't even sure that I would stay alive. I already thought that it was all over. After the bang, I already got my mindset that something bad would happen now, because it was clear that the plane had received damage. I was conscious when I felt the impact. I was being thrown back and forth. It all lasted for a few seconds, and then silence. Everything was quiet, and I realized that was it. We had landed.
Eventually, BakuGry flight had landed. For some, it was the last destination, while for the others, Aktau will be a place of rebirth to the second life.
The Azerbaijan State Civil Aviation Agency has announced the cancellation of flights to several Russian cities. The decision comes in light of the investigation into the Azal plane crash and ongoing flight safety concerns.
Azerbaijan State Civil Aviation Agency cancels flights to several Russian cities, including Mineralny Vody, Sochi, Volgograd, Ufa, Samara, Grozny, Makhachkala, Saratov, Nizhny Novgorod, and Vladikavkaz. The decision has been made taking into account the preliminary results of the investigation into the crash of the Embraer 190 aircraft of Azerbaijan Airlines flight J28243 Baku-Grozny due to physical and technical external interference. Also earlier, Azerbaijan Airlines informed that the captain of Azerbaijan Airlines flight J28717, operating en route Baku-Mineralny Vody, made the decision to return to the airport without leaving Baku airspace immediately after takeoff and receiving a notice to airmen about the closure of the airspace over Makhachkala.
For more information from Kazakhstan surrounding the Azerbaijani Airlines plane crash, we go to our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina in Aktau.
The Kazakh Airlines has suspended part of its flights to Russia. Kazakh Air has announced that it's temporarily suspending flights on the Astana-Yekaterinburg route from December 28 to January 27. The company shared in a statement that the suspension of flights was carried out to ensure the safety of passengers and crew members based on the results of an ongoing risk assessment of flights to Russia. Also in March 2022, the Kazakh Airline Air Astana suspended flights to Russia due to the termination of insurance coverage for commercial flights to this country. According to the last updated official information about plane crash, the second black box from the Azerbaijan Airlines plane has been recovered. As transport prosecutor of the Mangistau region says, 2 flight recorders retrieved will be handed over the Air Accident Investigation Division for analysis. He also noted that the survivors and ground service personnel have been questioned and efforts to identify additional witnesses are ongoing. The audio of radio chatter between the dispatcher and the crew has been collected. The inspection of the accident site, spanning over 2,000 square kilometers, is continuing. This is the latest news from here, Aktau. Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ.
The crash of the Azal Flight 8243 is another devastating reminder of the risks posed to civilian aviation in conflict zones. As investigators work to unravel the truth of the tragedy, the spotlight is now on the broader implications for aviation safety and regional stability.
On December 25, 2024, Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8243, an Embraer 190 en route from Baku to Grozny, tragically crashed near Aktau, Kazakhstan. The accident claimed 38 lives, including both pilots, and left 29 passengers injured. The crash, initially surrounded by uncertainty, has now taken a significant turn as the preliminary investigation strongly suggests the involvement of a surface-to-air missile. The flight departed from Baku at 7:55 local time. Due to dense fog at Grozny airport, the plane was redirected. Reports from the flight's final moments indicate GPS interference near Grozny, a phenomenon previously documented in the region. The aircraft diverted towards Aktau, Kazakhstan, but disappeared from radar at 8:40. It reappeared later, showing erratic altitude and speed changes before attempting an emergency landing near Aktau around 11:30. According to an AnewZ exclusive, the preliminary investigation confirms that Flight 8243 was likely hit by SAM during its flight over the North Caucasus. Expert analysis and multiple sources suggest shrapnel-like damage on the fuselage, consistent with an air defense missile strike. This conclusion aligns with ongoing regional tensions and heightened Russian military activity due to Ukrainian drone incursions. Matt Borey, Chief Intelligence Officer at Osprey Flight Solutions, told the Wall Street Journal, "Video of the wreckage and the circumstances around the airspace security environments in southwest Russia indicates the possibility the aircraft was hit by some form of anti-aircraft fire." Justin Crump from Zipline, a risk advisory company, told the BBC Radio 4, "It looks very much like the detonation of an air defense missile to the rear and to the left of the aircraft, if you look at the pattern of shrapnel that we see." Military expert Yan Matveyev told Euronews that without serious evidence, it is difficult to assume anything other than an anti-craft missile caused the attack. He noted the damage suggests fragments from Pantsir S-1 missile or a similar system with small warheads. Mark Z of OPS Group stated that analysis of the plane's fragments strongly indicates a surface-to-air missile strike, estimating the likelihood at 99%. Kazakhstan is leading the investigation with international support. The aircraft's black box has been recovered and its data is being analyzed. While the Kremlin has cautioned against premature speculation, aviation analysts stress the need for transparency. The spokesperson for Kazakhstan's aviation told earlier, "We are working closely with international partners to ensure that the cause of this crash is identified. Every effort is being made to analyze the black box data and other evidence collected from the crash site." Azerbaijani Minister of Digital Development and Transport Rashad Nabiev, on his part, has said that the plane crash was seemingly caused by what appears to be an external impact and that the investigation team, along with aviation specialists invited for this case, will examine what kind of weapon, or rather, what kind of rocket was used. The crash has sparked global concern. Azerbaijan declared a day of mourning, with President Ilham Aliyev extending condolences to the victims' families. Airlines such as El Al have since reviewed their routes over Russian airspace, underscoring the broader implications for aviation safety. As the investigation progresses, the emerging evidence overwhelmingly supports the theory of SAM strike, potentially due to misidentification amidst regional tensions. AnewZ continues to monitor the situation, providing expert insights and updates on this developing story.
Russia considers that it is still too early to say anything about the Azerbaijani Airlines plane crash before investigation concludes. The flight that crashed in Kazakhstan has been indicated by multiple sources to be downed by a Russian air defense system. When Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was asked on this, he said that he will not comment on the crash until the results of the ongoing investigations are known.
We have our aviation authorities that can make assessments of the incident. Only they can provide any information. As for us, we do not consider ourselves free to comment on the incident.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Russia could use the new intermediate-range hypersonic missile Oreshnik again, but is not in a hurry to do so. Putin also confirmed that several Oreshniks will be put in place in Belarus. He announced this earlier this month, speaking to his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko, when he said the missiles could be deployed in the second half of next year. Speaking on Ukraine at the same press conference, Putin said that Russia is open for Slovakia to host peace talks with Kyiv. To end a conflict, he said Russia was determined to bring to a conclusion. Putin, who this week hosted the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico in the Kremlin, said that Fico, an outspoken opponent of European Union military support for Ukraine, had offered his country as a host to talks between Russia and Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly criticized Slovakia, which borders Ukraine, for the friendly tone Fico has struck towards Russia since his return to power after an election in 2023. This holiday season, many Russians are tightening their belts as inflation exceeds 9%, pushing up the prices of everyday goods. Wage increases in some sectors have not kept pace with the soaring costs of food, utilities, and everyday spending.
As Russia's economic struggles continue under the weight of sanctions and the ongoing war, prices for staples like butter, potatoes, and chicken have risen sharply, with some items becoming up to 30% more expensive in just the past few months. Meanwhile, the ruble remains under pressure, now trading at around 105 rubles to the dollar, making imported goods even pricier. In Omsk, prices have risen sharply, and residents highlight that the amount of products you could buy for $20 is drastically different this year.
Prices have noticeably increased, incomes are sufficient. But when you go to the store, you realize that with 2,000 rubles, you used to be able to buy a lot more.
Residents in Yekaterinburg acknowledge the rising costs but are adjusting to their new reality.
Everything got more expensive. Everybody knows everything, but everything is available. People try to live by their means. Prices are rising. Everything's become more expensive. We cannot influence it. We just live with it and adapt.
In St. Petersburg, even the cost of Christmas trees has become a luxury for many.
There are people that need a tree who don't even ask the price. They just buy one. And there are people who, even when we offer discounts, they say they can't afford it. I wish everyone season's greetings, all the best, and that next year, everyone can afford a tree.
In Moscow, ordinary goods like bread have seen prices nearly double, with a loaf now costing half of the dollar compared to 20 cents earlier this year.
Public utilities are getting more expensive, taxes are getting higher. It's very noticeable. When you go to the shop, a loaf of bread that once cost 20 rubles now costs 50 rubles. Such things are very well noticed.
Despite real wage growth in sectors like defense and technology, inflation has far outpaced income increases, with prices expected to end the year at 9.8%. Projections suggest inflation will peak in April 2025 before starting to decrease. While the central bank has kept interest rates high at 21%, borrowing costs remain elevated, with mortgage rates reaching as high as 30%, cooling demand in the housing market. With sanctions continuing to limit access to foreign goods and services, Russia's economy remains under significant strain, and the financial challenges for its citizens look set to persist into the new year.
Over in Berlin, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier dissolved the Bundestag, clearing the way for snap parliamentary elections on February 23rd. Steinmeier dissolved the lower house of parliament after the government of the Social Democrat Chancellor Olaf Scholz received a no-confidence vote earlier this month. Ahead of the election, the Conservatives hold a comfortable lead of more than 10 points over the Social Democrats in most polls. The far-right Alternative for Germany is slightly ahead of the Social Democrats, while the Greens are in fourth place. The mainstream parties have earlier said that they refuse to govern with the AfD. South Korea's parliament impeached the acting president Han Duck-soo. The move follows his refusal to appoint 3 constitutional court justices, despite protests from the ruling party.
South Korea's National Assembly voted to impeach acting President Han Duck-soo, with 192 out of 300 lawmakers backing the motion. The vote saw heated protests from the ruling People Power Party, which argued the vote was invalid and accused Parliament of tyranny. Han, who became acting president after President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment on December 14, faced criticism for refusing to appoint 3 constitutional court justices. The opposition Democratic Party, which controls the National Assembly, pushed for his removal after Han declined to formalize the appointments without bipartisan support. Despite disagreements over whether a simple majority of a 2/3 vote was required, Parliament Speaker Woo Won-shik confirmed that only a simple majority was needed. Under South Korean law, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok will assume the acting presidency if Han is removed.
We now go to New York and our Mitch McCann reporting on Donald Trump's Christmas message with bold claims about the Panama Canal and China.
In a Christmas Day message, Donald Trump continued his focus on the Panama Canal, writing Merry Christmas to all, including to the wonderful soldiers of China, who are lovingly but illegally operating the Panama Canal. Panama and China established diplomatic relations in 2017. But Panama's president has responded by saying there is not a single Chinese soldier in the canal and rejected any suggestion that Panama would be willing to negotiate control over the canal. The major waterway cuts through the continent, allowing the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans to connect. It serves as a vital transportation route for military and commercial vessels worldwide. It was built by the US in the early 1900s, but was handed over to Panama at the turn of the century. And since then, fees to access the canal have increased. And Donald Trump believes the US has been ripped off. The president-elect raised the issue during a speech at a conservative conference recently in Arizona, saying, "Has anyone heard of the Panama Canal? Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal, just like we're being ripped off everywhere else." Donald Trump has also announced his pick for US Ambassador to Panama, Kevin Cabrera, who is currently serving as a local county commissioner in Miami. Cabrera's appointment will be subject to congressional approval. And Panama isn't the only country being targeted by Donald Trump in the weeks before he takes office. He has also been referring to Canada as America's 51st state and suggested that the US should buy Greenland. Mitch McCann for AnewZ in New York.
We now go to the Middle East, where Yemen's Houthi rebels have claimed responsibility for a missile attack that targeted Tel Aviv's international airport. It's the latest in an escalating exchange of fire between the Iranian-backed group and Israel. Trent Murray brings more from Tel Aviv.
Well, overnight here, for the fifth time in the past 8 days, those incoming rocket sirens sounded as a Houthi ballistic missile was fired from Yemen towards central Israel. Air defense systems were able to intercept that missile, but it does follow really a ratcheting up of these types of attacks that we are seeing from the Houthi. The Israeli government launching a major wave of airstrikes in response against Yemen. They targeted Sana'a, the capital, including its international airport. We also understand port facilities were struck, as well as energy infrastructure. The Israelis are saying that these were sites that were controlled by the Houthi and that they were used by Iran to smuggle weapons and missiles into the hands of the group to then be able to be used against the state of Israel. We've seen footage from those attacks showing enormous fireballs across various sites in Yemen, but right now it seems the Houthis are not backing off. It has not deterred them. Their rhetoric certainly suggests that they are going to continue these types of attacks. They say they are doing it in solidarity with the people of Gaza, who have been now under 14 months of siege and warfare. They've also suggested that if there is any sort of ceasefire, that they would back off. Right now, we know that Israeli representatives, as well as representatives from Hamas, have been holding negotiations in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, on said ceasefire. Right now, there doesn't appear to be any major breakthrough, but it certainly is hoped here that that ceasefire could be an opportunity for tensions to be reduced. But the Israeli government's position right now is that they too are going to continue these types of strikes against Yemen. It is a distant foe for the Israelis, so to speak. It's around a 2,000-kilometre journey. We understand dozens of fighter jets took part in that overnight operation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying this morning that more may be yet to come. He says Israel will continue to launch airstrikes against the Houthi until, quote, the job is done. Trent Murray for AnewZ, Tel Aviv.
Still in the region, the situation in Syria remains tense after recent clashes between Assad loyalists and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham members, with questions about the future of stability. For more details, we go to Adnan Nasser in Beirut.
There have been reports coming out of Syria that the situation is calm after the recent clashes between Assad loyalists and members of the HTS government. The head of the HTS and de facto ruler of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, has said that he's ready to do whatever it takes to make Syria a stable country for all of its communities. The Alawite community, which belonged to the former president Bashar al-Assad, feels that they're being marginalized and singled out and scapegoated for the crimes of Assad's regime. Now that things have returned slightly to normal, the question is, what will happen next? There has been a curfew installed in the city of Homs, which is centered in central Syria. Most of the inhabitants are a mix of Sunni, Alawites, and other communities. Their task, and what they're hoping for the HTS to fulfill, is its promise to make sure that Syria is a country where everyone can live in peace and dignity and with security.
On the situation in the Middle East, we're talking to Arthur Bloch, editor-in-chief of the Lebanese Liberum. Let's start with the latest. The Houthi rebels in Yemen say they fired a missile at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport day after Israeli strikes pounded the airport in Sana'a and, as Israel claims, other Houthi targets in Yemen. This as well was a retaliatory strike. We know the Houthis said they will not stop before a ceasefire in Gaza, while Tel Aviv says they won't stop until, quote, the job is done. How long do you expect these tit-for-tat exchanges to continue?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show again. And it's a difficult question to answer. How long will it take? Well, you have seen with Hezbollah and Lebanon and Hamas that it can take years. But what I ask myself is, why are they doing this? Is this like an Iranian sacrifice? I mean, if you look what happened in the past, let's say 5-6 months, Iran lost Hezbollah, they lost Hamas basically, and now it looks like they're pushing the Houthis to go all in against Israel. I think they're heading for total destruction. That's the only thing I see. So I really don't understand it. What's their goal? They cannot win. They can only destroy the country further, the Houthis, and that's what's happening right now.
Would you say that this latest flare-up is endangering the ceasefire deal in Gaza? Recently, we heard the actor saying that a deal was close. Does this jeopardize any talks on a truce?
Yeah, I mean, a deal is closed. A deal is closed for weeks, for months. I mean, I don't believe anymore in that a deal is upon us. And I even doubt if the hostages are still alive. Where are they? Yeah, I mean, we're now 1 year, 1 month, 2 months actually. To be honest, I don't see it happening.
Well, with the truce holding in Lebanon, what's the situation now in the country? Are people feeling more normal than they were during the conflict with Israel?
Yeah, well, life is back to normal. The political equations changed. We have early January, there will be elections for a new president, something that's been due for 2 years now. Almost 3 actually in January. And yeah, life continues. I mean, what else? Only the political equation has changed a bit. Hezbollah is not so powerful anymore as it was. I mean, it's still a political entity, but they don't have the means anymore to enforce their will to the other people. And that's quite interesting, because there will be an election of a president, and in the past, let's say the past 4 presidents were all pro-Syrian, pro-Iranian, pro-Hezbollah, despite the fact that they were Christians. And I expect now that, you know, maybe we can see some changes in how Lebanon chooses its future.
In another part of the region in Syria, following the toppling of Bashar al-Assad, there were recent reports of unrest in traditionally minority communities, towns, as well as attacks on the security forces of the new administration by Assad loyalists. Would you say such developments were somehow expected, and what can come of them?
Yeah. And I think this is just the beginning. It will be listen, if you look at it from Iran's perspective, it's in their interest to keep on creating chaos and disorder. That's what they did in Lebanon for all these years. Now, I don't think they're going to give up Syria that easily. And they don't care one bit about people. They just care about their geopolitical strength. And giving up a country like that, where they used to be, for 50 years, the regime was in charge there, and all the people who benefited from that regime are now angry and frustrated. So I expect a vicious circle of violence can take on maybe years.
We saw hostilities in the north of the country continuing but between the Turkish-backed groups and Kurdish militant groups. The de facto leader of Syria said all the factions will be disbanded and united in a regular military. Do you see all these groups joining, as some say they will not lay down their arms?
Well, if you look at the Lebanese civil war and how the militias were disarmed, that it all, was enforced. There was not one militia say, you know what, here's our weapons, we will call it quits. It doesn't work like that. So you need to have some kind of army, some kind of supervision. Could be the Turkish army or I don't know, maybe the Americans, helping the new regime, let's say, to unify. Because, if you are a militia, you have strength, you have power, you do not give it up for nothing. Not going to happen.
Arthur, thank you so much for joining us and providing your insights and opinions. In other news, Kyrgyz President Sadir Japarov inaugurated the construction of a new railway linking China, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, aimed at opening up the region as a supply route to Europe. Covering a distance of almost 523 kilometers, the strategically important railway will run west from the Chinese city of Kashgar in the northwestern Xinjiang region through the Kyrgyz border city of Jalalabad to Andijan in Uzbekistan. The route will ensure supply of goods from China to Kyrgyzstan and then on to Central Asia and nearby countries, including Turkey and even to the European Union, Japarov said at the ceremony. Over in Turkey, the tea harvest has been reshaped by climate change, with farmers in the eastern Black Sea region now picking fresh tea into December. Warmer temperatures are extending the harvest season and redefining the country's agricultural calendar.
For the first time in Turkey's history, the tea harvest in the eastern Black Sea region has been extended into December. This shift is a direct result of rising temperatures and climate change. The Hurriyet Daily News reported that warmer than usual seasonal temperatures have prolonged the harvest period. Tea production is thriving in provinces of Rize, Trabzon, Artvin, and Giresun, where nearly 1 million families cultivate tea across 830,000 hectares of land. In Rize, known as Turkey's capital of tea, high-quality harvests are still underway, a trend attributed to the warm weather and the ongoing climate crisis. Rize accounts for 65.6% of Turkey's dry tea production. In previous years, the tea harvest would typically conclude by October. A 2023 report from Turkey's Food Engineers Chamber highlighted the country's position in the global tea industry. 7th in cultivation area, 5th in dry tea production, and 4th in per capita annual tea consumption. This unprecedented extension of the harvest season underscores the growing impact of climate change on agriculture. It presents both challenges and opportunities for Turkey's tea industry.
Well, that's all from us for now. Thank you for tuning in and keep watching AnewZ.